Today, let's walk through the steps on how to read a pattern to get you started. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are going to be talking about how to read patterns so that you can get started on the right foot when starting off with a new idea. Now, I'm going to be using this new look pattern. I've actually made it before, and I will include a link to that video in case you're interested. But as you'll see, whenever you get one of these envelope patterns, they'll always have sizing on them. So this is really important so you make sure you're getting the pattern that fits yourself. So on the back of these patterns, you'll see there's going to be information about what that sizing really entails and what size corresponds to like their numbering sizes. So specifically, it'll talk about the measurements, normally for like your bust, your waist, your hips. Sometimes they'll have others. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to measure yourself and see where you fall within those measurements so you can see which sizing is best for you. Now, if you were between sizes, like let's say you were between a size 12 and a 14, it really depends on the pattern if you want to size up or down. If you're using a stretchier material, you could probably size down, but if it's something where it's with a woven fabric, you'd want to size up. Now, in addition, it'll tell you how much fabric you're going to need, what the final measurements of the garment are, and then any additional items you'll need, such as notions for like a zipper, bias tape, maybe a button. All of that will be listed on the back of the pattern as well. So there's a lot of information that comes just from the envelope of the pattern. Now, when you open it up, there's going to be instructions. You'll see there's a lot of information on this page. You'll be talking about the different layouts for the pattern options, how you should lay out the pattern pieces, what pattern pieces the envelope comes with, and then there'll be lots of little markings as well that you want to pay attention to. So it can be very overwhelming at first when you see all of this information listed out and you're trying to figure out specifically how to go about making this. Now, some items that I always look for when I'm first going through this is seeing how does it want me to do my edge finishing, if it has any suggestions or if it's something that I need to take into account. Most patterns will not talk about edge finishing in the steps. That's something you should always consider when you are starting. And then I also look at the cutting out layouts for the pattern pieces. So as you see here, it's showing that some of these pattern pieces are actually falling off of the fabric that has folded over, but there's a little star next to it, which means there are additional instructions. It will also tell you how the fabric should be laid out. So normally the fabric is right sides together, which is what that shading is letting us know. Then we also have these arrows for the grain lines, so how the fabric is being put together. And then what the star is telling us is we were going to be opening our fabric to cut out those additional pattern pieces. That will vary depending on the type of pattern you're using though, if there's special instructions. Now, sometimes when you get your fabric, it will be 45-inch wide fabric, other times it's 60-inch fabric, and that's what the difference in those cutting layouts are for top A or top B. You have those two options. It's really how wide your fabric is. Now, you also want to pay attention to if your fabric has a nap. So for example, if it's faux fur, which way is the fur laying, as that will, if you cut it out incorrectly, you're going to have the fur looking a little weird or your fabric's not going to be laying right. So there's a lot of information that comes from this one page of material, and it really helps you to get started on the right foot. So as you can see here, I have my fabric folded, so the right sides of the fabric are together, and then I have this fold along the edge. So I'm going to start laying out my patterns very similar to how the instructions were suggesting. So I have my fold, I'm laying out my pattern onto the fold. So you can see here, it's telling me specifically where that fold should be. And I'm just going to be repeating this with the other pattern piece as well that's supposed to go on the fold, as my fabric was pretty wide. So I'm able to do this all just in one big piece of fabric. Then what you need to pay attention to is sometimes they'll have the grain line. So for example, this piece is to be cut out on the bias, so it's going to be cut out on a diagonal so that it has a little bit more stretch and give to it. Once all of these are laid out though and they're pinned up, I am then going to start cutting them out. Now, if you hadn't used this pattern before, I would highly recommend making a mock-up, so using fabric you don't necessarily care about, and then cutting it all out and sewing it to see what the fit is. Next though, it is time for us to start with our markings. So on the pattern pieces, you'll see you have these little triangles and you also have your dots. And these are where you want to cut out, and it will help you line up the pieces when you start to sew them. So I'm just going to use scissors to cut out those little triangles. And then I use a needle and thread to just make a little tack almost where that dot is. So you can see I now have this little pink dot, and that will help me when it comes to lining up my fabric. And then you want to repeat this for all of your other pattern pieces that have markings. Now there are other ways to do these markings. You could use a marker. You could also, they have like little tools that'll help you out with this. I just find that a needle and thread and scissors is something that we normally have on hand, and it's a great way to transfer those markings over. So with all of that said, our pattern pieces are now set up for success and ready to be sewn. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next.